Jane McCall and the Twilight Stacks. Chapter 4. The Research. Jess took about an hour to recharge. Once she was up, Jane had to take her outside and play fetch until she calmed down enough to be in the house without risking widespread destruction. Once the zoomies had worn off, Jane brought her in and set her on a chew toy, then turned on the computer. She looked up the words she didn't understand first. Nisaidie apparently meant help me in Swahili, and sairaus meant illness or disease in Finnish. At least, according to internet translators and the online dictionary she'd used to double-check. She scribbled the translations in her journal. Maybe the danger she had been convinced existed was a sickness? But how did that tie into the thought that something had been stolen and the sense of déjà vu? She worked her way down the list. She couldn't find anything about overturned bookshelves, but cluttered shelves symbolized internal chaos. Not helpful. Books on the whole tended to mean knowledge, or the seeking thereof. Damaged books meant a need to be careful with how you seek or use knowledge. And that was exceedingly general. Dream symbolism around objects tended to have a lot of trends and not a lot of consensus. There wasn't much to go on for the emotions and sensations front either. The distress could be due to an unresolved stressor in her life and sent her to pages upon pages about anxiety dreams. This didn't seem right, though. The setting was all wrong for a dream about her current problems, and it was someone else in danger, not her. The tugging could mean she was being called for a higher purpose, that she was being toyed with by forces out of her control, that she was feeling emotionally vulnerable, or half a dozen other things. The one thing she did find agreement on was that reading coherent words in dreams was reserved for a tiny percentage of the population. Lucid dreamers and writers could, maybe, but Jane was neither of those. Something about the language processing center of the brain, Wernicke's and Broca's areas, being shut down during sleep. But Jane had seen words in English as well as the other languages. The words had meshed into the theme, too. It didn't seem like they were gibberish. She sighed and put her head in her hands. This was going nowhere. What else did she have to work with? The targeted message? Return the favor, Jane. What favor? She dug through her memories, trying to recall if she owed any important debts. Nothing sprang to mind. Instead, a flash of information came through, words on a page and a throb in her temples. Keep impaled objects in wounds, pull them out, and you'll bleed to death. It was stupid. She'd read that tidbit somewhere, and yes, it had saved her life. That didn't mean a favor was attached to the knowledge. How could it be? The thought elevated her much-reduced headache to new heights. She groaned and headed for the medicine cabinet. One near avalanche of bandage boxes and pill bottles later, nobody had organized the cabinet in years, and Jane sure wasn't going to volunteer. She retrieved a can of soda and swallowed an aspirin. Afterwards, she pressed the can to her forehead and leaned back against the kitchen counter. So, this was going to be an issue. Possibly a major issue, depending on her approach. Experimentation would be the key. She put the soda down, closed her eyes, and focused. What did she know, and what did she want to know? Headache. Tied to the weirdness? Maybe. 1.5 sets of simultaneous events did not a correlation make. 3 trials for proof. Or was it 4? She'd say 3. Her head hurt enough already. She could round the half. All right, let's see if I can trip my migraine up again. The trigger last time seemed to be trying to recall specifics of the favor she may or may not owe. That tied to her knowledge of how to survive stab wounds. Start there. What had she read which contained that information? Her attempt to recall the book title resulted in the sensation of her eye being stabbed from inside her skull with an ice pick. Jane yelled and dropped the balls of her feet, pressing the meat of her palm against her eye to ease the pain. She gulped for breath and waited for the torment to subside. It took what felt like an eternity, but the pain did fade. Jane stayed where she was until Jess noticed her distress. The dog nudged Jane with her nose and whined until Jane gave her attention. It brought a small smile to Jane's face. Once Jess was satisfied, Jane looked over to the microwave clock to check the time. She grimaced when she saw how late it was getting. Her parents would be home soon. Jane sighed and took off her ankle brace. Might as well get her physical therapy for her ankle over with before more people started filling up the house. The repetitive motions inherent to PT gave Jane plenty of brain power to spare. While she pointed her foot against a resistance band, she considered the implications of her little test. There was definitely something she'd forgotten. She was certain of that much. It was connected to the book that had saved her life. Right. Efforts to remember more than the bare minimum led to debilitating headaches. Not great. Her dream was probably connected, and if it was, someone was sick and in trouble. That meant she was on a time limit. So how could she approach this quickly while remaining indirect? She switched to rolling her ankle. Finding the exact book would be a good start. It wouldn't be in the house. That would be too easy. The only other place she could think of right away would be a library. There were two she could check. The first would be the school library, and the second was the city's Pine Memorial. The school would be easy. The Pine would take a bit more time, but she went frequently anyway. Moving her usual day up a bit wouldn't be hard. Her last set of exercises for the day was a set of one-legged heel raises. These were the worst, in her opinion. They always left her calves burning and arches twinging. She used the back of the couch for support and focused on completing the set. 4 seconds up, 4 seconds down. Again and again and again. By the time she was done, she was convinced her leg muscles had been replaced by noodles soaked in hot sauce. She hopped over the back of the couch and started to massage her calf. She didn't get far before the door opened. The scramble of paws on hardwood heralded Jess's arrival, and her dad's laughter let her know who had arrived. She sat up to check, and yep, that was her parents coming back from work. Oliver, Jane's dad, was a beanpole with salt and pepper hair that was more pepper than salt, and a sunny smile made all the more charming by ever so slightly crooked teeth. He worked as a weather reporter at the local news station. Jane had inherited his hazel eyes and long limbs. Her mom, Charlotte, was also tall and dark-haired, but she had a bit of padding her husband lacked. She was a severe, serious-looking woman with a wicked sense of humor that showed itself at the most unexpected times. Her job was a manager at the nearby hardware store. Jane rested her chin against the back of the couch and let her eyes scan over them. Her dad was in his weatherman suit, and her mom was wearing heavy work boots, a flannel shirt, and jeans. She was carrying a battered purse, while her dad had a plastic bag. Sana recognized it as one containing Chinese takeout. Them's bribing foods, Jane thought. She wondered why they would feel she needed to be bribed. Hi, she said. Hello, Jane, her dad replied. He held up the bag. We brought dinner. Would you mind getting some plates and utensils? She nodded and rolled off the couch. Whatever was going on, the promise of egg rolls was more than enough to render her apprehension irrelevant. Queries, kudos, or concerns? Like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.